What's going on? You're here with 828 and thanks for tuning in. So I want to share with you guys the CL1B compressor and also just share with you some of the history of the LA2A, because the LA2A was the first precedence for this CL1B to be created. And the reason why they created the CL1B was because they liked the sound of the LA2A, but they wanted to create a compressor that had more functionality than just the main two dials that you can see on the LA2A. Some of the history of this is pretty amazing, and if you go back and look at it yourselves, you can do that as well. But first off, I want to share with you some of the history just really briefly. This is what the CL1B actually looks like in a hardware version. So you can see that some of these dials, like the parallel compression, don't exactly exist on the actual hardware, nor does this low-cut sidechain thing here, which just allows you to cut out 80 Hz and 220 out of the actual compression signal there. But anyway, that's just the compressor right there. So first off, let's go through some of the history of tube tech so you can see how long this actually has been around for and the ideas of creation and stuff like that. So in 1987, which you can see here, it says the LA2A type compressor, which was the CL1A opto compressor. It was created back then. Later on down the track, they created the CL1B, which was kind of similar to the circuitry of the LA2A and the attack times and stuff like that, but featured other things, other tubes and stuff like that it didn't originally have all of the same stuff in the LA2A. So the main function for this compressor was to actually have a compressor that sounded more clear, more accurate, and had just an amazing sound to it. The reason why they created the CL1B was because some of the compressors back then, when this was created, were actually degrading the signal, and they wanted to have more clarity and compression and more control over the compression as well. So in essence, you can see the main two dials here. There's a lot more dials on this compressor, and I'll just go through some of them if you don't know what they are. So first off, the threshold, which is on pretty much every compressor nowadays. This allowed you to adjust your threshold so to where the signal was coming in. So it could have been at -20, -10, whatever it was. Now you could adjust it instead of just pushing the gain into the compressor and then pulling down your peak reduction, which was basically the threshold. That was how this compressor worked. The output then allowed you to increase the output, so you could obviously make up the gain that you'd lost. And you had then a threshold, the ratio here, which you can control how much ratio you had instead of just a set ratio, which this compressor had. It only had two sets, so one was limit and one was compress. From memory, I think compress was about 4:1 or something like that, or maybe 10:1. I don't really recall, but the limit mode was a lot higher, so it was like a limiting function instead of just compressing the signal. Then this compressor here, then it allowed you to have the attack and release settings as well, which you didn't see on the LA2A. And this was controllable. You could have fixed, or you could actually manually adjust it, which is so much better than just having a fixed ratio if you wanted to have control over the actual attack and release settings. Then you had this sidechain bus, which obviously I think in the back of the unit you could sidechain into it. That allowed you to do that internally or externally, but I believe this is just the internal here. So it's such a fantastic sounding compressor. I'll show you guys what it sounds like in just a second. But this parallel section here is really good as well. It saves you a lot more time if you don't have to set a parallel bus right next to it and run parallel compression that way. So let's first off have a listen to the LA2A on the signal, and then I'll show you what the tube tech sounds like in comparison. So first off, we've got the LA2A. Let's play this kit that I've got going on this track and see what that sounds like. So let's chuck on the tube tech compressor and see how that sounds. So you can see the difference in the sound quality. I mean, it's hard to say because this LA2A Teletronics version, they had so many different versions of this compressor and they all sounded different. The TubeTech mainly just had the one version and they kind of maybe reiterated some of them. I'm not too sure exactly in that regard, but this compressor actually sounds quite nice. It sounds really creamy, especially for a plug-in version of the compressor. The analog hardware version of this sounds a little bit better in my opinion, only because analog, you just can't compete with compressors in the digital realm versus analog. I don't think you can, at least anyway at this stage. They're probably about 98% there as far as getting the character. This compressor actually sounds a lot like the real hardware unit as far as the compression character and stuff like that. But the actual sound of the warmth of the compressors, you just don't have that with plugins. But that's not to say that you can't make it sound just as good if you add other things into the mix to make it sound just as good. So I've got other things here just quickly to show you. I've got this plugin here which is Crush and allows you to crush the signal, so bit crushing and drive, so it creates a bit of drive and harmonics in that regard. So it sounds a little bit more analog. And then I've got another plugin here, which is, I'm going to review these as well, but Beat Skills is that thing. It's an interesting plugin. I just recently purchased this because it's on special. I think it was like $10. I couldn't go past it. It just has functions that I really want to have inside of my digital audio workstation. It's got 12-bit, 8-bit, and 16 and 24, which I'll go through that later on. I just want to show you kind of what's going on with this, this setup here. But this compressor here, the TubeTech compressor, I'll play it without any compressor on here. It's going to actually be a little bit louder because I'm decreasing the volume with this compressor. But let's just play it without it first and then put the compressor on there and show you what that sounds like. I'll just drive it a bit as well. Let's see how we go. Make up some gain. Without it. Now I probably wouldn't drive the compressor that much. I didn't actually drive it that much when I was making this, so I really just had the attack and release settings kind of how they were set when I first got it. I was actually using this compressor to create a bit of lower volume with the drum kit because I wanted it to sit lower in the actual song. That said as well, I was actually using it to bring out some of the room of that kit and to really get a nice sound with this compressor. You can hear how it creates like a warmth to the track, brings the clarity of the drums as well as just bringing them, sitting right in the mix. So just so you know, this compressor is something that you can get through Softube. As you can see down here, you can download this for a trial and see what it sounds like on your mix. Check it out. As far as I know, it doesn't have a limit for the time, but you can't save the settings that you've got on here. If you save and then exit, it'll be back to the same as it was when you first opened it. So anyway, if you want to check it out, I'll leave the link in the description below so you can check this compressor out. Otherwise, I hope you guys enjoyed this and a little bit of history on the compressors, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace out.